interesting podcasts about the Akedah, the story of Abraham and Isaac in particular, and the theory that there's actually one of the biblical authors, the author, the northern Israelite author of Genesis. Basically, if you read the author, maybe Isaac is sacrificed, and that the author never has Isaac again in the text. He's never alive again in the text, which is weird, but it's very weird, but it is a possibility. It's a troubling possibility, and one that, again, maybe we didn't want to think about, which is why we didn't think about it, why we did everything we could to eradicate it. But in the meantime, anyways, so that's just one example of things that in Genesis that are dis- disturbing, kind of a part of our psychology in the background, and it makes Genesis really one of the most amazing books, not just in the Bible, but in the world, because of what it does to helping us understand who we are as people, as a kind of a not just I mean, okay, maybe there's a historic part of Genesis, but it's much more the psychological and emotional and kind of the human part, how we deal with our family, how we deal with the darker parts of ourselves. All of those things are in Genesis. And
Can
so,
you,
yeah.
can you tell me what do you think about the Robert Alter translation?
Alter's translation, I think, is pretty well respected. There's definitely, Robert Alter was a professor for many years at Berkeley, the Bible professor there. I, I think there are people who kind of follow his school. I definitely was of the people who, I was definitely of, I studied with people who were not his people. I mean, it's not that they didn't like him, it's just that they had a different approach to the text. He is a writer who has deep respect as a Jewish person, has a deep respect for Jewish the Judaism of the text, which I think is important because there were Bible scholars over time, even up until the last generation, who were quite frankly anti-Semitic. Yeah, I mean, on the anti-Semitic spectrum, we're definitely on the we don't really care for Jews side. And some of those people had huge, immense power in the biblical studies field and in the archaeological field, including people who control the Dead Sea Scrolls. So this was a real issue, the anti-Semitism that existed in the biblical school. So Alter, Friedman, a whole bunch of the next generation of biblical scholars were Jews and had respect for Judaism, and there were then other scholars who were not Jewish who also started bringing a much more positive light to Judaism through the text. So Alter definitely has that going for him, but I think there was a little feeling that maybe Alter doesn't. I'm just saying what the knock on it was that his approach didn't take into consideration archaeology and history as much as some of the other biblical scholars. So he's on kind of the spectrum of like, well, here's the text, this is what we have, and this is what we're going to go with.
He
And
seems
so,
more poetic. Am I
yeah, he's more literary. He's focusing on the literary aspects of the text, which
okay?
which are super important. But I also think there's like, okay, but what do we know historically? So in the back of your mind, if you have a Bible person, and I did it when I was at UC San Diego, I had Bible professors who also drew on archaeology and history and what do we actually know factually right now about these people. And Alter is definitely not on that side. It's not that he disregards archaeology; he's just not that concerned with it. So there's an advantage to studying someone who's doing a literary, more like you said, more poetic or literary view of how to study the text. And then there's also people who look at it a little bit more from the history and what do we know, and what
Isn't
is
it
it that's
interesting that we all come with our frame of reference, our own frame of reference?
absolutely.
you know?
Absolutely. I think it's just important to be honest about it. And that's why I usually like to say, if somebody says, well, what do you think about Alter? What do you think about this person? What do you think about this person? I say, look, I like them. Here's what you need to know about where they're coming from. Because if you don't honestly know where these people come from or what their agenda is, you're obviously missing part of what so part of my job is just to let people know, hey, this is where this person's coming from. And look, at the end of the day, I have my own agenda too. My agenda in teaching the text and my agenda in looking at the Bible and pretty much everything is how does it affect us as how do I affect it? How does it affect the Jewish community? It's not that I don't care about the other communities, but that's my agenda. It's honest. I'm
They've just done
honest
some
about it.
interesting classes through how am I pronouncing it right? Linhausen through Northern California.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that Alter has done some classes and stuff with
Yeah.
Genesis and stuff that just were
The
very
wonderful
interesting.
thing is that a lot of these people you can now see. You don't have to go to the university now. You can watch a
Yeah.
podcast. You can. Oh man, I haven't shared it yet. I will I promise today I'll do it. I haven't posted up the links for last week's Kabbalah class, but like as I said, there was a wonderful lecture that Daniel Matt, who wrote God in the Big Bang, he did about Kabbalistic texts. And I meant to post it after last week's class,
That's
after
the
last
wonderful thing
Wednesday's.
that came out of Zoom, out of COVID. The
Yeah,
only good thing was
yeah,
Zoom, you know?
yeah, yes, it's true. But a lot of these lectures were on YouTube and had been recorded, and then people just said, "Yeah, we better post them." Anyways, so there's a lot of good links, and I'm going to be posting obviously some on the. I have been posting them on the Jewish Journey classes, the Wednesday night class, and I'll do it when we get into to now I'm able to do that. I mean, now I'm able to teach this class on Zoom, which I never did before COVID. And as I said, we've been able to broadcast this series of the prophets and the writings, what we call the Nach, the last two-thirds of the Bible that we've been doing for the last 5 years. They're all recorded now. They're all posted up on YouTube. So all the previous classes from literally the book of Joshua all the way here to Chronicles have been posted. So you know what's funny as I was kind of coming to the end of it, and now we didn't have like what we didn't have 5 years ago was AI. I could literally take all these lectures, all these discussions, all these classes, and literally create an AI generated version of it. And I said, well, I could do a book, a commentary on the prophets and the writings, which there really aren't very many commentaries. Definitely not modern commentaries. Most of my biblical professors have not done commentaries on they'll do a book of the Bible. Like the Anchor Bible series is a wonderful Bible series where they have different scholars who took the book of Hosea and a different author, a different professor did Psalms. Actually, there's actually two different scholars who've done Psalms for just the Anchor Bible, and I think each one is 3 volumes. So the Anchor Bible was edited and put together by David Noel Friedman, another one of my professors who passed away a few years ago. The Anchor Bible series is volumes and volumes of biblical commentary, but they had different people do each one. Not that these are the Anchor Bible that that we've been doing, but there's a commentary now, and there's things I brought into these texts that I could do it. And I thought to myself, well, I could do it. We could do it. I could do it as a book. And then I thought to myself, why would anyone do it as a book? No one reads books anymore. If I was going to do anything, we could edit it into some kind of either video presentation or some kind of, basically, a video commentary on the text. But look, what we're using right now, Safaria, for our actual text is a wonderful. It's a wonderful text. The problem with it is that the commentaries that it has. So if you look at the commentaries, there is not a lot of traditional Jewish commentary on the Book of Chronicles, for example, right? So if you look at this, you know, there's one commentary there, which is a fairly new one, but none of these other ones, well, I'll just show you. None of these other ones are even in English. So unless they're actually in English, you'll see this, EN, if it's in English, but of the commentaries of Chronicles, literally, this is the only one. This is the only one that's in English, the Steinsaltz. So there is not a lot of commentary that's been done on the Book of Chronicles by Jews. by Christians either, for that matter. But that's because, again, most Jews do not study the book of Chronicles. If you go into a traditional yeshiva and ask people what's in the book of Chronicles, they'll look at you with a blank stare. It's not that they are against it. It's obviously it's part of the Bible. They value it. But have they studied it? No. There'll be two or three lines of the Book of Chronicles that someone would be able to be able to quote in a yeshiva, and probably one of them was last week because it was turned into a song, "Vayiven Uziyahu et Migdalim Yerushalayim," because it was a song, because it was an Israeli folk song. In a yeshiva, they might not even know that because they don't listen to popular music. But anyways, the point is that there aren't a lot of lines in Chronicles that we know. They're not in our prayers. They're not in our commentaries. They're not in the Talmud for the most part. And so we just don't get a lot of commentary on this section. So it's really left to biblical scholars and to biblical commentaries that you'll see on the shelves of a library or bookstore that no one goes into anymore. By the way, one of the best things about
Boo.
well, kind of get over that. You get over this, but when you're when you're studying Bible and well, when you when you study Bible,
Jews love
it,
books.
I know, Judith. When you study Bible in college and you go into the library and you go into that section, I remember at UCSD, no one ever went to the biblical study section. The best part, the best part is the catalog. The catalog for the biblical studies is BS. That's true. That's true. It's BS. So you go up to the stacks and then I'm in the BS section. So anyways, yeah, no one was ever there. There was not a lot of dating that was going on in the BS section of the, the library. There was nobody there. Anyways, it's great to see everybody. We have a huge group today, which is wonderful always to see everybody and to be able to, as we again have a chance to study this section. Um, I mentioned that today we're reading about King Hezekiah, and King Hezekiah was one of the few really good kings that we read about in the book of Kings and in the book of Chronicles. Today, when we finish, I'm going to show you a comparison of what is in the King's version of his story and what's in the Chronicles version of the story, and why they're both important. Because if we didn't have both, there'd be things we would not know about this guy. Again, from the standpoint of the Jewish history, he's one of the most important kings. Literally, you can go back to the kings and you have King David and King Solomon. You have probably, so far, of the kings we've read, you have probably King Uzziah, and then you have Hezekiah, his great grandson. And then King Josiah coming up is very important. And then also the last couple of kings who kind of deal with the Babylonians and then end the dynasty. But for the 400 years from the end of King Solomon's reign to the end of the kingdom, really, this guy Hezekiah is one of the most important. And last week we were introduced to him. We read that his father was not a great guy. And what he does is he has this huge Passover celebration, which goes on the entire chapter 30 is about making this big Passover. And again, just to show you from the very beginning, what it said about this dude is that King Hezekiah was, his father Ahaz died. He's not a good guy, right? Um, and Hezekiah comes on when he's 25. And the line that said right at the beginning was that he did what was pleasing to God, just as his forefather David had done. So you know right away from the introduction that this guy is a special guy. He's He's going to start doing the right things. Um, and he's young enough when he takes over that he's going to have an impact. Though some of the people we've read who are good don't live a very long time, he gets to have a pretty decent reign. So he has this wonderful Passover celebration. He brings people even from down from the north. He invites them to come and celebrate Passover. And it basically seems like no one's really been celebrating Passover for the last 400 years. It's like he rediscovered Passover. And everyone has a great experience. It's wonderful. They love it. The priests do their job, especially the Levites, the priests, but especially it says the Levites had done a great job. They were ready to go. Where some of the Kohanim don't seem to be ready, the Levites were. And that's kind of where we left off. And today we're going to read what happens after that, Passover. So today we're going to be talking about Hezekiah and a little bit beyond that. But any questions, any comments, any interesting things that are going to you want to get off before we start? All right, Rosemary. Yeah, sorry. Oh yeah. I know. Yeah, I can make it a little bit bigger. Here we go. Here we go. All right, Rosemary.
When all this was finished, all Israel who were present went out into the towns of Judah and smashed the pillars, cut down the sacred posts, demolished the shrines and altars throughout Judah and Benjamin, and throughout Ephraim and Manasseh, to the very last one. Then all the Israelites returned to their towns, each to their homestead.
Yeah, and what's significant about this is that part of this religious reformation is that unlike previous times when the previous kings maybe had rededicated the temple and made the temple pure, cleared out the altars and shrines that were actually, believe it or not, in the temple precinct in Jerusalem, these people actually went out through the rest of the country and cut down the rest of the altars and the shrines that had been put up around the whole southern kingdom of Judah and Benjamin, right? All around Jerusalem and all the way down there, and even up into the north, even up into Ephraim and Manasseh, the two larger parts of the northern kingdom. So there was this, we're only going to worship in Jerusalem. We're going to cut down all these other posts and all these other altars. Again, some of these altars were to other gods, but some of these altars were to our God. They just weren't in Jerusalem. But the people in Jerusalem, especially the priests, didn't want that to happen. They only wanted people to worship in Jerusalem. They don't want anyone making a sacrifice anywhere else other than Jerusalem. Again, why? Because they are priests in Jerusalem. The person who wrote this is a descendant of those priests in Jerusalem. So it seems like they go through this religious reformation and they're making sure everybody's going to have to go to Jerusalem because we're cutting down all the other shrines. All right.
Hezekiah reconstituted the divisions of the priests and Levites, each of the priests and Levites according to his office, for the burnt offerings, the offerings of well-being, to minister and to sing hymns and praises in the gates of the courts of God. Also, the king's portion from his property for the burnt offerings, the morning and evening burnt offering, and the burnt offerings for Sabbaths and new moons and festivals, as prescribed in the teaching of God.
Yeah, and the words for that are kakatuv b'torat Adonai, which are written in the Torah of God. Sometimes it says the Torah of Moses. This one says the Torah of God. They're following the laws, especially the laws of sacrifices. They're following the Torah. So they're saying, like, this is what's in the Torah. Now, again, if this was edited by the people who wrote this during the time when Chronicles was written, these are people, Ezra and the scribes that are helping him. They want to make sure people follow the Bible that they have. At the time of Ezra, and maybe Ezra himself, the theory goes, they actually are the ones who put this Torah of Moses together. So when Ezra is talking about, or the chronicler is talking about the Torah of Moses, or the Torah of God, He's talking about his book. Now, he didn't write it, he edited it. No one's ever claiming that he wrote the Torah. We believe that he edited these books together, but that he's the one who did it. So that the guy who's actually, the people who are responsible for saying the Torah Adonai are the people who actually are making sure that the Torah Adonai is the book, the scrolls that they're carrying around with them now.
He ordered the people, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, to deliver the portions of the priests and the Levites, so that they might devote themselves to the teaching of God. When the word spread, the Israelites brought large quantities of grain, wine, oil, honey, and all kinds of agricultural produce, and tithes of all in large amounts. The people of Israel and Judah, living in the towns of Judah, they too brought tithes of cattle and sheep, and tithes of sacred things consecrated to the eternal their God, piling them up in heaps. In the 3rd month, the heaps began to accumulate and were finished in the 7th month. When Hezekiah and the officers came and saw the heaps, they blessed God and the people of Israel.
And so this goes on for months, 4 months. People are bringing in food and they're bringing in stuff in. Now, this is being written down, let's say, maybe 150 years after it happened. 150 years after it happened. But it might have been written, well, it's being edited. This might have been written not long after it happened. But the people who are deciding this is going to be there are telling you it happened, or they're retelling that it happened. I want to be careful about how I say that because we don't know. But of course, what they're saying here is look at how the people were doing the right thing, right? They were bringing in all this stuff for the priests with an important reason. You need to do the same thing. You people who are hearing this now need to do the same thing. The reason that this is here is instruction so that people understand, okay, they didn't do it. They caught up. You do it right in the first place. You just keep bringing the stuff. So the people here are very happy. They're doing what God wants. The priests are very happy. This is beautiful. This is going the way the plan is. They're playing catch up, but they're doing the right thing.
The chief priest, Hezekiah asked the priests and Levites about the heaps. The chief priest Azariah of the house of Zadok replied to him, saying, "Ever since the gifts began to be brought to the house of God, people have been eating to satiety and leaving over in great amounts. For God has blessed the people. This huge amount is left over."
Yeah. So the reason that they're bringing it is because everyone is bringing it, and then they're getting stuff back. And at home, they're getting good crops. It's the way things are supposed to be. Everything's going great.
Hezekiah then gave orders to prepare store chambers in the house of God, and they were prepared. They brought in the gifts and the tithes and the sacred things faithfully. Their supervisor was Conaniah the Levite, and Shimei, his brother, was second in rank. Yehiel and Azaziah and Nahat and Asahel and Yeremot and Yozabad and Eliel and Ismachiah and Mahat and Benaiah were commissioners under Conaniah and Shimei his brother by appointment of King Hezekiah. Azariah was supervisor of the house of God. Koreh, son of Imnah the Levite, the keeper of the east gate, was in charge of the free will offerings to God, of the allocation of gifts to God, and the most sacred things. Under him were Eden, Miniamin, Yeshua, Shemaiah, Amariah, and Shechaniah in offices of trust in the priestly towns, making allocation to their brothers by divisions, to great and small alike, besides allocating their daily rations to those males registered by families from 3 years old and up, all who entered the house of God according to their service and their shift by division, and in charge of the registry of priests by clans and of the Levites from 20 years old and up by shifts in their divisions, and the registry of the dependents of their whole company, wives, sons, and daughters, for relying upon them, they sanctified themselves in holiness.
And again, what they're telling us is that the priests were divided into divisions. They were divided into shifts because they couldn't have all the priests there at the same time. So they ran in a monthly cycle. They would run in shifts. And so when that priestly family's turn was to come up, and obviously there were better shifts and worse shifts, probably most importantly, depending on the weather, depending on when you were going to get more stuff, by the way. If you were there during the times of people bringing in their harvest, you were there at the right time. And there were not coincidences. Priestly families that were more powerful had better shifts. Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And for the Aaronite,
Wait, 1 second, 1 second.
oh,
John
I
has a
can't
question.
hear
Oh,
what's
yeah, I'm going to repeat it when he's done.
okay.
So what John is saying is this is the first time he's really noticed the food supply for the priests themselves, that what's happening here is not just sacrifices, but the way to keep the priest fed. Yeah, it's pretty explicit here. It's there all the time. It's just not necessarily as explicit and as obvious that the food here is being heaped up. Now, part of this is because, at least according to the book of Chronicles, it hadn't been done. I believe that what's being reported here is factual. Like all the people that are named here, I suspect that this is drawn on sources of people who witnessed the Hezekiah reforms, and they were there, and they knew the people that were there, and they had reporting of what kind of, how many amounts and who was getting it. And so that, I believe, was reported. The reason that it's being reported now, the reason why it's in the book of Chronicles, is because the people who wrote the book of Chronicles or edited the book of Chronicles, whose agenda it was to set this, is to make sure that people know you're still supposed to do this, right? And so when you do it, you're going to get back, right? And so this is the prosperity gospel, which is, you give to the church and you're going to get back, which is again, it's in the Bible. I mean, there is that understanding that if you give, then you'll get back many times over. In this case, people are saying, well, yeah, God commanded you to bring it to the temple. So people are doing what? Either following, as it says, the word, the Torah Adonai. They're following literally God's command. But yes, the reason it's there is to make sure people continue to do it. In this now, again, Chronicles is really written, or it's being presented for people during the Second Temple period, after the Babylonians had already destroyed the temple. So let's make sure it's being done now, which is really the subtext, which is, hey, do what when our ancestors did it right, things went good. So we'll finish this, and I'll show you the point a little bit clearer. Okay. Oh, here we go.
Hezekiah did this throughout Judah. He acted in a way that was good, upright, and faithful before the eternal his God. Every work he undertook in the service of the house of God or in the teaching and the commandment to worship his God, he did with all his heart, and he prospered.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, especially because he's doing what's right in the temple and for the priests. Now, As you can imagine, nobody's perfect. And Hezekiah is definitely not perfect. Though, again, he's pretty good compared to the ones who came before. He's really good, including his own dad. And by the way, I don't want to ruin the story. His son's not so good. So, as I told you before, the lessons that the rabbis take away from this, and again, they don't talk about Chronicles a lot in the Talmud, but one of the things they do talk about, the rabbis, is these stories teach us, if nothing else, they teach us just because your dad is a schnook doesn't mean you're going to be a schnook. And just because you're not a schnook doesn't mean that your kids won't be schnooks. So that is their, I'm summarizing, paraphrasing what the Talmud says, but it basically is the line. Um, just because your dad was a bad guy doesn't mean you are. Just because you're good doesn't mean your kids are going to be good. So Hezekiah, though, is not perfect. And we're going to, when we finish Hezekiah, we'll review his life, and also I'll share with you and review for those who were not here in Kings or don't remember what happened. So, but this is still his reformations and what he's doing there. Now we're going to get into the political issues.
After these faithful deeds, King Sennacherib of Assyria invaded Judah and encamped against its fortified towns with the aim of taking them over.
Yeah, that's not good. For all this good stuff that this guy's doing for his people and for God and for the temple and just doing it right, he's living during a very, very, very dangerous and dark time, which is the Assyrian Empire's conquest of the entire Middle East. The Assyrians, Assyria, not Syria, but Assyria, in Hebrew, Ashur, the Assyrians are the first empire in the world. You go back, I mean, they teach kids this in sixth grade world history class. The Assyrian Empire are the first people who decide to conquer other countries and make them part of their empire and just say, this is the way we're going to rule. This is a province of our country now. The Egyptians, had done stuff like that. They had conquered parts of Africa and even into Canaan, and even, but it was not at this level. So Assyria is considered the first like functioning empire that has, for a couple of generations, that type of structure where they're able to conquer other countries, exile people from one place to another, resettle people, basically create the empire system, which, if we're honest, right, and we look at history, because they're within like 100 years, the Assyrian Empire is done, and the Babylonians take over, and then the Persians take over from the Babylonians, and then the Greeks, etc. But we know the greatest empire in human history was the Romans, right? The Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was the really only functioning for centuries, incorporating much of the known world, definitely the Mediterranean, all the way through the Middle East, all the way to, basically all throughout, literally almost to India, from India to literally Spain, and all the way across North Africa, was part of one empire. So the Romans perfected this, but the people who started it were the Assyrians. It all goes back to these people. And it all goes back to this guy, essentially, Sennacherib. This empire we know a little bit about because, again, this was the Nineveh. These are the people of Nineveh, the people we read about it every year at Jonah. These are the people who, out of that capital, end up conquering all the way into Africa. Now, again, they don't last very long, but the Babylonians conquer them and essentially use their structure and their roads and their system and make it their empire. And then the Persians come along and conquer the Babylonians and basically make it their empire. And then the Greeks come along and conquer the Persians and make this their empire. So all of this starts essentially right here, and we're witnessing it right now. And so when this little part of the world, our part of the world, the land of Israel, is telling this story We're telling the story as a country that's literally being gobbled up by the Assyrian Empire. And here's the crazy thing. This guy, King Hezekiah, is able to withstand the Assyrians. And so understand that everything that we read about this guy is based on this knowledge of the fact that he was able to withstand them. Doesn't mean that he wasn't part of the Assyrian Empire. It just means that he was able to keep autonomy for Judah while this was all happening. And that was, whatever you want to call it, maybe a miracle, maybe, again, done by God, maybe just a really weird luck to him. What happens here is significant to us. And maybe you can make the argument, places within us this idea that anything is possible, even going up against the Roman Empire. Just keep that in mind. This is part of our psychology from here on out. Here we go.
When Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib had come, intent on making war against Jerusalem, he consulted with his officers and warriors about stopping the flow of the springs outside the city, and they supported him. A large force was assembled to stop up all the springs and the wadi that flowed through the land, for otherwise, they thought, the king of Assyria would come and find water in abundance. He acted with vigor, rebuilding the whole breached wall, raising towers on it, and building another wall outside it. He fortified the Millo of the city of David and made a great quantity of arms and shields. He appointed battle officers over the people. Then, gathering them to him in the square of the city gate, he rallied them, saying, "Be strong and of good courage. Do not be frightened or dismayed by the king of Assyria or by the horde that is with him, for we have more with us than he has with him. With him is an arm of flesh, but with us is the eternal our God to help us and fight our battles." The people were encouraged by the speech of King Hezekiah of Judah.
So you hear that. You hear that. Now, he might not have been the first person who said that, right? I mean, let's face it, King David battling the Philistines and, other, we already beat the Egyptians to some extent. We escaped the Egyptians, but beating a larger group is, something we've already experienced. But this withstanding the empire is something that when he says that, and you read what the Maccabees said to the Greeks, or what you hear Jews saying to the Romans, it's the same mentality, right? Which is, we have God. And so that's when I'm telling you that this is part of our psychology. This is, there's a direct line between this and, the mentality of the Jewish people have today. We're going to talk about what he did in a second with the infrastructure. You already heard a little bit, but we're going to get to it. The most important thing being, okay, so he built the walls. He fortified the areas around the city so that the outside fortification was reinforced, because we had read that, in previous times, even the kings of Israel had come against us, right? We had just read that King Pekah in the northern kingdom, had come against his father and had destroyed parts of Jerusalem. So it had to be rebuilt. He spent this time rebuilding the temple. Well, he had to get now serious about the walls. But you also heard this crazy thing that he just said we had to do. We have to stop up the water supply. Otherwise, when these guys come in to invade us, they'll have water supply. So we're going to dam up our own water supply so that they don't have access to it, so that our invaders don't have access to it. That is a very bold and strategic thing to do, but you better have a plan. And he does. But he just said, we're going to stop up the water so they don't have it when they come here. Otherwise, they will never leave. They'll be able to fight against us and lay siege to us. But if we take away the water from them when they get here, so he's basically saying they're going to be here, right? They're coming. There's nothing we can do. They're going to be here. What do we do about it? Really kind of amazing, right? Here's what happens.
Afterward, King Sennacherib of Assyria sent his officers to Jerusalem, he and all his staff being at Lachish, with this message to King Hezekiah of Judah and to all the people of Judah who were in Jerusalem. Thus said King Sennacherib of Assyria, on what do you trust to enable you to endure a siege of Jerusalem? Hezekiah is seducing you to a death of hunger and thirst, saying, the eternal our God will save us from the king of Assyria. But is not Hezekiah the one who removed your God's shrines and altars and commanded the people of Judah and Jerusalem, saying, before this one altar shall you prostrate yourselves, and upon it make your burnt offerings? Surely you know what I and my ancestors have done to the peoples of the lands. Were the gods of the nations of the lands able to save their lands from me? Which of all the gods of any of those nations whom my ancestors destroyed was able to save their people from me, that your God should be able to save you from me? Now then, do not let Hezekiah delude you. Do not let him seduce you in this way. Do not believe him. For no God of any nation or kingdom has been able to save their people from me or my ancestors, much less your God to save you from me.
So this is an amazing bit of propaganda, right? And we actually have a version of this that we already also read in Kings. Yeah. So I just want to see if there's any extra stuff there. No. So when the Assyrians come in and try to, when they try to demoralize Judah, it's an interesting approach, right? Because first of all, one of the approaches is to say to them, Hezekiah has already cut you off from God, because Hezekiah destroyed the altars that you used to worship God at. So at least according to, so this seems to, the king of Assyria seems to really know what Hezekiah's religious reformations were. He seems to like really know what's been happening, which tells you, first of all, that the religious reformations that Hezekiah did were not popular with everybody. Well, how do we know? Because the people liked having those shrines. They liked having a shrine in their backyard. I don't need to go to Jerusalem to pray to God. I can do it right here in my backyard. We know that. That's why they keep coming back. People are like, I don't have to go to Jerusalem. I'll go in my backyard and worship God there. So this seems to be the understanding that, yeah, they were worshiping God there. And we know sometimes they're not worshiping God there. Sometimes they're worshiping Baal and Asherah, and they're doing whatever they want on their altar. Again, this is the problem with having a non-centralized structure, which is that if you don't have a place where people come together to pray, people just do whatever they want. That, by the way, that's not Jewish. That's human nature. If everybody does their own religious thing, then there's no, they're not agreeing to, there's no dogma that they agree to. It's like everybody does their own thing.
But Mark,
Yes.
didn't this change, I assume, after after Babylonia, that it is a holy place wherever Jews pray, that you can pray at home, and that
Yes,
you can...
but the Babylonians, the destruction of the temple, and when the Jews come back, the problem we have in the second temple, from the second temple on, the rabbis tell us The people worshiped God. They worshiped God the way they were supposed to worship. They worshiped God in the temple. They didn't worship God in the different places. We don't understand exactly why that was the. I mean, look, there's a lot of theories about why polytheism was finally done after this. It wasn't done in the rest of the world, right? Babylonians destroyed the temple in 586, and for the next 500 years, Jews don't seem to be having a problem worshiping God anymore, right? By that I mean they're not worshiping Baal anymore. It's not like a problem. I'm not saying that there weren't Jews who did. I'm just, but it wasn't the problem. It wasn't the problem anymore. They weren't worshiping their own. They weren't worshiping God in their backyards anymore. They were going to Jerusalem during the time of Jesus, during the time of the Maccabees, during the time 200 years before. It seems like people are going to Jerusalem and doing what they're supposed to do when it comes to God. So it's not clear why, because again, they could have been doing their worship there. Again, there's no synagogues necessarily yet, though we do start seeing synagogues 200, 300 BCE. We know that. We've talked about that. Actually talked about that on Wednesday, a couple months ago. We have synagogues developing while the temple is still standing in Jerusalem. But they're not shrines. They're not places where people are sacrificing. They're not places where people are offering incense. They're not places where anyone's saying, hey, this is just as good as Jerusalem. No one's saying that. The synagogues were existing at a time when there was a temple in Jerusalem and everyone knew that's different. Okay? So there is a problem here. And we know it's a problem because the Assyrians just came in, and as they're trying to demoralize the people, they're on their loudspeakers or whatever they used in those days to make people hear them. They said, look at Hezekiah. He destroyed all your shrines. And now guess what? You can't worship God anywhere but here in Jerusalem. Good job, Hezekiah. You ruined it for everybody. Then, funnily enough, they go, and it doesn't even matter because your God can't stop our God from destroying you. So it doesn't even matter if you had your own shrine because our God's going to overrun you anyways. That's what they just told them. No God's been able to help against the Assyrians. You think your God can? So it's a two-part thing. First of all, everyone, you all understand this, right? Hezekiah destroyed the places where you could worship your God, so you don't even get to talk to your God except in Jerusalem. So all of you fools that are out in the suburbs, you're not worshiping God anymore. So first of all, that's done. Second of all, even if you could, it wouldn't make a difference. That's what they just did. It's a 1-2 punch of being demoralized. And so they're clearly, by the way, though, I just want to make the point again, the first part only works if it ticked people off. And it did. It did. Again, for some reason, after the Babylonians destroyed the temple, everyone wants to go to the temple. It's almost like the psychological impact of losing it made everyone want it and then say, okay, we're only going to go to that place now. It's almost like it's almost like one of these agreed upon, I don't want to say it's delusion, but it's agreed upon, we're all going to buy into this, that if we can just have the temple in Jerusalem, everything will be fine. And it worked. I mean, again, I know we looked at it in Wednesday night class. They ended up building the temple in Leontopolis in Egypt. It was there. People offered sacrifices there. People liked it. It wasn't a major thing. Most of you have never heard of the temple in Leontopolis. It's not a big deal, but it did. So there were exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, people wanted to go to Jerusalem to offer a sacrifice, and that was it. And again, it could be that they were like, hey, we have other ways to pray. Like, I think what Judith is saying is, people were like, hey, we can pray in our backyard and we don't have to offer a sacrifice anymore. But of course, it's not just about sacrifices. As John pointed out, it's about the food. You're not just offering a sacrifice, you're bringing me food. So the priests are
Money
like,
and power.
bring us food. What? What? Somebody? Oh, all right. Yeah. 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 Not negotiations, it's humiliation. Yes. It's to everybody. It's to all the people. Y- Yeah, yeah. This is what this is what this is what we do a little less of this propaganda today. We do a little less only because like back in the day, it was easy. You have Tokyo Rose, broadcasting in English to American soldiers, and everyone had a radio. Today, what are you going to do? You're going to get on every social media. Okay, so when Donald Trump tells the Iranian people it's time for you to rise up, we're going to be there for you. That's propaganda, right? That's yeah, yes, people do it. They drop leaflets. They do, yeah. So this is still being done, right? You got to do it. It's the psyops. It's what you do when you're trying to make it easier for your army, right? By psychologically demoralizing the enemy. So it's definitely happening. And again, we're watching it happen like in real time right now. It's much harder, and it is more complicated, I think, today because of how many media sources we have and how fragmented media is even in Iran. So I think I think it's ironic that we're reading this right now, but yeah, it happens today. So this is the softening. Yeah. Well, the hope is no, I know you, you hope that there's a way, you hope that there's a way to make the war less bloody by making the people quit. So you basically say, there's no point in you going to war against us because you're going to lose. So just lay down your weapons and walk away, because that way at least you'll survive. So that's essentially what he's told them. Hezekiah is he's got to listen to this while his people are being demoralized. So again, he's doing everything right in the temple. He's doing everything right, and then he's dealing with this. I mean, this is the fact. This is what we have. All right.
His officers said still more things against the eternal God and against Hezekiah, God's servant. He also wrote letters reviling the eternal God of Israel, saying, just as the gods of the other nations of the earth did not save their people from me, so the God of Hezekiah will not save this people from me. They called loudly in the language of Judah to the people of Jerusalem who were on the wall to frighten them into panic so as to capture the city.
And again, we read this before. The message was not in Assyrian. The letters might have been in Aramaic. Letters might have been in the local language of diplomacy, but the propaganda was in the language the people understood. Yeah, they spoke. People who spoke Hebrew. They had probably a guy who went over from Judah, who was working for the Assyrians, who they captured or who defected or whatever, and using him. Yeah. So they're using the language of the people. They're coming across. Hey, look, I'm gonna speak. That's what Tokyo Rose did. That's why she spoke why she spoke in English. Yeah.
They spoke of the God of Jerusalem like they spoke of the gods of the other peoples of the earth, made by human hands. Then King Hezekiah and the prophet Isaiah, son of Amoz, prayed about this and cried out to heaven.
And that's that Isaiah. Isaiah ben Amoz is that Isaiah, the Isaiah of the book of Isaiah, that guy, the big Isaiah. Yes, that's Hezekiah's mentor. That's his prophet. That's his guy giving him advice. You got a pretty good prophet there. It's helping to back him up. But this is what Isaiah is dealing with right now.
God sent an angel who annihilated every mighty warrior, commander, and officer in the army of the king of Assyria, and he returned in disgrace to his land. He entered the house of his God, and there some of his own offspring struck him down by the sword.
So the book of Chronicles just said that an angel destroyed his army. Now, there's not a great detail in that. Now, it is not exactly what it says in the book of Kings. We'll go back and look at it in a sec. Let's just finish it up, and then we'll go back and look at what the book of Kings says happens.
Thus, God delivered Hezekiah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem from King Sennacherib of Assyria and from everyone, providing for them on all sides. Many brought tribute to God to Jerusalem and gifts to King Hezekiah of Judah. Thereafter, he was exalted in the eyes of all the nations.
So King Hezekiah survives this siege. And this is different than what we have in the book of Kings. I mean, not, you know, not in you know what? Before I share this with you, let's read through the next chapter. I mean, let's read, and then I'm going to show you the difference in Hezekiah, between Hezekiah and in Kings and in Chronicles. Let's finish up Hezekiah.
At that time, Hezekiah fell deathly sick. He prayed to God, who responded to him and gave him a sign. Hezekiah made no return for what had been bestowed upon him, for he grew arrogant. So wrath was decreed for him and for Judah and Jerusalem. Then Hezekiah humbled himself where he had been arrogant, he and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and no wrath of God came on them during the reign of Hezekiah. Hezekiah enjoyed riches and glory in abundance. He filled his treasuries with silver and gold, precious stones, spices, shields, and all lovely objects, and store cities with the produce of grain, wine, and oil, and stalls for all kinds of beasts, and flocks for sheepfolds. And he acquired towns and flocks of small and large cattle in great number, for God endowed him with very many possessions. It was Hezekiah who stopped up the spring of water of Upper Gihon, leading it downward west of the city of David. Hezekiah prospered in all that he did.
Okay, so we're going to go back and review this a little bit, but just to make it clear, the one thing he did wrong was he got sick and he got healed, and he didn't show proper appreciation for his restoration. That's what it said he did wrong, which in the scheme of things is not nearly as bad as what some of the other people have done. Okay? So just understand, he's a little bit like Uzziah, who ended up getting leprosy because he went into the temple, if you remember that story. For those who weren't here, his great-grandfather went into the temple after he had done some amazing things, and then he got punished by being hit with leprosy. It's a pretty serious thing. Last years of his life, he had to be set aside, Uzziah. Hezekiah's thing is similar in that there's an illness, and in this case, though, he gets sick and doesn't show his appreciation for his being saved, and that was his arrogance. But overall, pretty good guy. And then, he does all the great things for the religious reasons, and then it's going back to his infrastructure. So let's finish with this because we're going to talk about this. This is important.
So too in the matter of the ambassadors of the princes of Babylon, who were sent to him to inquire about the sign that was in the land, when God forsook him in order to test him, to learn all that was in his mind. The other events of Hezekiah's reign and his faithful acts are recorded in the visions of the prophet Isaiah, son of Amos, and in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. Hezekiah rested with his ancestors and was buried on the upper part of the tombs of the sons of David. When he died, all the people of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem accorded him much honor. Manasseh, his son, succeeded him.
So there's Hezekiah. He's a good guy. It says you can read more about him in the book of Isaiah. So that's interesting because, again, it talks about some books of prophets that we don't have. Book of Isaiah, we do have. And Hezekiah is mentioned in it. He's not mentioned in it a lot, but he is mentioned in it. But he is mentioned a lot in the book of Kings. And so when they're talking about the book of Kings of Judah and Israel, we assume that means it's the book of Kings that we have. It could be that it's a larger volume of the book of Kings, which was then shortened down into the Book of Kings that we have now, because there seems to be references to things that, well, the Book of Kings talks about things that are written elsewhere, which we don't have. So it seems as though there's other historical sources we don't have. But, and we know there's other books that are mentioned that we don't have at all. So, at least we have these, or at least we have it, and I'll show you in a second. Marcia. So Marcia just asked us, do we have evidence of the tombs? As I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, or maybe even said last week, we are excavating in the city of David, in the area we talked about last week too, Silwan, which is the areas outside the wall, not in the old city, and it is possible that we are close to where this is. We are excavating, obviously, I'm going to say obviously, I do want to say, since you've all asked, because you know that if we could find these tombs, this would be huge. If we could find where King David was buried, we would flip people out, right? Because not only would it be important to Jews, but Christians who see Jesus as a descendant of King David, all of that would be like, it would be huge. But even if we found King Hezekiah's tomb, it would be huge. We believe we are very close to where those tombs are. And the interesting thing is what were they buried? Would they have been buried with a lot of stuff? Because we know that the Jews did not bury people with lots of things because we didn't believe that you needed them in the next world. The Egyptians did. And by the way, that's one of the reasons why, when we talk about human sacrifice, we know the Egyptians killed lots of people and buried those people with their pharaohs, right? So we knew, whether you want to call that human sacrifice or not, that's definitely human killing, that they killed people in the prime of their life to send them off with their pharaoh. But regardless, I'm getting off subject. We're talking about these tombs. If we found these tombs, this would probably one of the most important things we could excavate. The weird thing is that it may not actually give us that much actual archaeological information. There may not be that much. The material find in that type of situation may not be what it would be for other cultures. And we found King Tut's tomb. It was huge, right? Changed what we knew about the Egyptians. It changed, it was huge. It was huge. It caused a whole fashion trend in the 1920s. It was huge. We don't know what we would find in these tombs, and again, they might have been raided already, so we might not even have any. There might not even be anything, period, at all there. Not even the bones. So, again, yes, this would be one of the most important things to find. But we did find this. We found Hezekiah's water tunnel. It's in Jerusalem. We walked through it. We have the tunnel that he built. So,
I can't seem to find I want to see what it physically, I mean, I saw online physical pictures of what it looks like. I know it takes like 40 minutes, but where exactly is it? And what did he block off?
So it's right outside. I'll show you some pictures of it.
Okay, yeah.
This is I'll show you I want to show you a good picture of it. Well, so here's a diagram of where it goes from. This is the Gihon Spring, and this is the Pool of Siloam, which I told you we were there in November, and it's drained. The Pool of Siloam was 2 years ago when we went there. Everyone who went to Jerusalem went to Pool of Siloam. It was filled with Christian pilgrims, usually filled with Christian pilgrims because Jesus did some healings here at the Pool of Siloam. This is the area called Silwan. So this is the area where the tombs are down here. This is the wall of Jerusalem. This is this area that we're talking about right now, where he stopped up the springs and was able to bring the water into this area instead. So the water was down here, and he brought it into here. These are all part of the fortifications around the city, and this is the area that we call the city of
And
David.
where does the water come from? It came from springs
It
along
came
the
from a
mountain?
spring right here, Gihon, the Gihon spring. But if the
Okay.
spring is out here, outside the walls, then the Assyrians could get to it, and then they would be able to get it. Instead, what he does is he stops it up, and then he brings the water through this tunnel. And this is what the tunnel looks like when you walk through it.
Yeah.
So you can walk through this tunnel. We're going to go through this tunnel in. Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did. We walked through it and came out in Jeremiah's, that cave where Jeremiah was. So you walk up from the city of David through this tunnel. There's a dry tunnel and there's a wet tunnel. So you can go through the wet tunnel and you're walking through. This is the part of the tunnel that we came out. Now, when we go back to, so some people, I mean, look, if you don't like tunnels, you don't go into this. But what's interesting here is that in the tunnel, we found this inscription. I'll show you. We found this inscription. Here's the inscription. We found this inscription here. It was found in 1838 by Edward Robinson. And then they found, they all missed discovering the inscription, probably due to cumulative mineral deposits. It was found in 1880 was when the actual inscription was found. I'm going to get to this because I want to, we discussed this before, but I don't.
There was a London Society for Promoting Christianity.
Oh yeah.
Jews?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. I have some of their stuff. I collect some of their stuff. No. This was a big deal. This was an Episcopal or Anglican group that was doing nothing but trying to convert Jews. So wait, no. So here's the, because I want to get to where it is today. I mentioned this a couple of months ago, but so at the time in the 1880s, right? Who controlled Jerusalem? The Ottomans. So this is here in the tunnel. So when you walk through the tunnel, you see this, which is a copy of it, right? It's Hezekiah's tunnel. So again, the version that we just read was right here. It talked about this. And in Kings, it says this in a little bit greater detail. I'll show you the Kings thing in a second. But here's what it says. This is what it says in Hebrew. Behold the tunnel. Right? Now, this is one of the oldest Hebrew texts we've ever found. It's 2,700 years old. And it is an exact confirmation of something that's in the Bible. So when we talk about like what are the oldest things that we can say, well, this is 100% the same thing. This is it. And people know it. I mean, it was found in a tunnel. It was not done, like it sat there for 40 years. People didn't even notice it. There's no question that it was found. Now here's the crazy thing, folks. Well, one of the many crazy things. Look where it is. Yeah. So this, and I always point it out to people when we go to the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, they have a replica there too. So they have one in the tunnel itself where it was found, and then they have another one for people in the Israel Museum so you can see it. It's one of a couple of things, 3 things that are the Istanbul Museum has. Look, the Turks are screaming about stuff that have not been returned to them that are in other museums around the world. Meanwhile, they're holding this. And arguably, again, one of the most important archaeological, if not the most important archaeological, biblical archaeological pieces that exist, the Turks are holding. And hidden? Yeah. So John just said, is there archaeological evidence that's been found in? We don't look. We can't say. Or you can't. You can't say, right? We would say the odds. I will say this: the odds that those things have been found are, if not 90%, they're 99%. The reason is that the excavations that Israel has been doing in Jerusalem for the last, let's say, since 1967, and even before that on the outskirts, in areas. But remember, Israel didn't control the city of David until after 67. So the whole area in Siloam, that whole area was under Jordanian control. So Israel didn't have access to that until 67. But whatever was done during this period, even from the Turkish period, any stuff that was done and excavated, Dead Sea Scrolls, everything you can think of that's been excavated, John, the absolute, almost 100% assurity that, of course, if the Palestinians are going to find it, they're not going to tell anybody. They do not want to establish the fact that Jews have an ancient claim to this place. So it is of no value to them. It's contrary to their agenda to have this be displayed or for it to ever see the light of day. Has it been destroyed? I hope not. But are they holding things? Is the Palestinian Authority that has control of the Temple Mount holding stuff? I mean, come on. Logic tells you that they are. It's logical that there are things that they have that they are on top of it. I mean, we get the garbage that they throw out, and we sift through the garbage that they throw out, and we found stuff in this garbage that they've thrown out. So we know that there's stuff there because we're sifting through their garbage and finding it. That's not my propaganda. That's a fact. So what has been found, we won't know. I don't know if we'll ever know. I will just tell you that the fact that the Turks were holding this, and again, the current Turkish government is going to do absolutely nothing to restore this back to Israel. That's obvious. Israel has asked many times for the Hezekiah, for all these three things, the Gezer calendar, for these things to be returned to Israel. I will tell you, I was in Istanbul this summer. I went to this Istanbul Archaeology Museum. You can't even see it. They have the whole, and it's not because it's I want to make it clear. I'm not saying they're anti-Semitic and they're not displaying it. The museum is in such disrepair and is in such poor presentation that it's not even on display right now. I went in there, I was like, where is it? Oh, you can't see it right now. Why not? Over half the museum is shut because they have different buildings that they have like 2 out of their 4 buildings are even open to the public right now. I swear. And it's right by Topkapi Museum. It's right by the palace. It's right by the area where all the tourist stuff is. It's not like you couldn't go there. But most Jews have no idea that one of the most important Jewish historical pieces is sitting in Istanbul Museum, and as of right now, you can't see it. Or actually, as of the summer, maybe it's open now. I doubt it, but yeah, it's sitting there in Istanbul Museum because they brought it back. The Turks brought it back. Turkey has refused Israel's request to be sent the. What do you want to say? Scholars have commented that the description has little, if any, significance to Turkey, and as evidence point to the fact that it was not on display in a public gallery in Istanbul. Anyways, yeah, as it says right here. Scholars have questioned whether Turkey can demand that its objects be returned when its own museum refused to return artifacts taken from previous colonies. In 1998, Netanyahu asked then Turkish Prime Minister Mesut Yilmaz to return the inscription, and in return offered to go to Israel's museum and choose all the finds of the Ottoman period that you want. His offer was rejected. That was before Erdogan was in power. So, yeah, it's not been done. So Oh, yeah, this was a nice one. In 2022, Turkish media stated that the Turkish government denied that they would return it on the basis the inscription was found in East Jerusalem, part of Palestinian territories. Thus, it was out of question to return it to Israel, a third country in Turkey's view. This is like, you can't make that up. That was 3 years ago. We're not going to return it to the Jews because it was found in Palestine, so we're not giving it to the Jews. I look that I'm not making that up. That's what Turkey said. I don't know. Look, how does a reasonable person? How do you? How do you? What do you even say to that? Anyways, so we're going back when we go back in November. We are going back to. I will just show you one more thing because um, right by that entrance is the pilgrimage trail, which is just being opened. Um, just being open. This is actually a Christian biblical study site. This is I mean this is an example of why like a lot of the Christian Bible sites have better information than some of the Jewish sites. Like for example, this map, which I wish it was on a Jewish site somewhere. It doesn't have to be, but it isn't. So here's Silwan. This is the pool of Siloam down here. This is the city of David. This is the Ophel. This is right by the entrance to where the wall is. Um, this is the wall right here. Um, um, but yeah, this is the Palestinian area I told you called Silwan. This is the area that's I mean, this is all Silwan. This whole area is Silwan. But this is the area where the tombs are right here. This area right here. I mean, probably somewhere in this area. So so again, this is the old city wall. It's not in the old city wall. It's on the other side of it. But here's the pilgrimage trail. So this has not been. This is something we're going to go to in November, which is this new underground trail that's going to go from the. This was what the pool of Siloam looked like during the time of Jesus. This was where Hezekiah brought in his water, so that it was on the other side of the wall. And you can see right here, the reason it's on the Christian site is because Jesus had a blind person go and wash in the pool of Siloam. So this is the pilgrimage road that's been excavated and is now open, and it's being opened right now. So we're going to walk on this path, which is just going to be opened. It was very close to being open this last time we were there, but this will go up from here. This is what it was back in the biblical times, and now it's underground. It starts outside the wall and then goes inside the city. Look, I've never been on it. I mean, I can show you the pilgrim, where it goes, but I've never been on it because only people who've been on it are the people from the government and the excavators. And as soon as it's open to the public, but I think it might have opened like this month. So it'll take people up into the old city. But it's underground right now. I mean, it's going to be underground. I mean, at a time it wasn't underground. When the pilgrimage trail was there, it was not underground. It is underground now. So anyways, there's Hezekiah's tunnel. This is the wet part of it. You can see people walking through the wet part. Yeah, it's an amazing thing to see, and it is right there in the inscription. Now, we're going to finish up today. We're not going to read any further, but I just want to show you the differences between the King's version, because as we saw in this version of Chronicles, we have another version of this text in Kings, which is a little different. Now, there's a lot more detail about the foreign part. When it comes down to it, let me just bring it up alongside. There's a much greater emphasis in the version of Kings with the Assyrian stuff than there is in the in here. So here I'm going to put up alongside it. Not Isaiah, but yeah, it is in Isaiah. This is the part of Isaiah that talks about this. But I'm going to show you the part from Kings. So this is Hezekiah. This is Hezekiah's stuff. This whole part here is not in the book of Chronicles, which is the part that talks about King Sennacherib's father, King Shalmaneser, who goes against the north and destroys the northern kingdom. And when he destroys the northern kingdom, he deports the Israelites to Assyria. That's what we call the lost tribes of Israel. Now, it was the Assyrians who did that. And according to this, he settles them in parts of what's today Iraq and Iran. Now, it's very possible that those peoples that got exiled ended up coming back into the Jewish people once we were exiled by the Babylonians, that we met up with our Israelite cousins who had already been exiled, and they kind of became part of our people again. It's also possible that they assimilated and became other peoples. I've mentioned this before. There's people all around the Middle East who claim that they're descendants of these Israelites, including, by the way, people as far away as India. The B'nai Menashe in India claim that they're descendants of the Israelite exiles. There's people all around the world, technically. There's people in Japan who claim that they're descendants of the Israelites. There's people in England who claim that they're descendants of the Israelites. That once these people got exiled, they wound up everywhere. It's possible, but it's not likely. I mean, weird stuff that when you go down the rabbit hole of what happened to the lost tribes. But yeah, I mean, one of the theories was that some of the larger groups in Afghanistan, even the Pashtun people, are descendants of the Israelites. Yes. So Marcia just asked, can't DNA tell it? Yes. There is DNA evidence that there are peoples who are possibly descendants of these people. None of those people that I've mentioned, there's DNA for. So there's no DNA that we found in the B'nai Menashe, who claim they're descendants of the tribe of Manasseh. There is no DNA evidence for it. By the way, that didn't stop those people from being able to be welcomed back to Israel. So thousands of Jews from India who are on the border with Burma and look more Asian than they do Indian, they have been repatriated and made part of the Jewish people, even though there's no DNA evidence for it. I've said this before, and I'll repeat it again because it deserves to be repeated. Of the hundreds of thousands of Ethiopian Jews that live in Israel, there is zero DNA evidence to link the Falasha or the Ethiopian Jews to the Jewish people. Israel never denied them access and never said that they can't be, even though, again, they claim they're descendants of Solomon, they claim they're descendants of the tribe of Dan, all of these legends of how they got there, there's no DNA evidence for it. No. Zero. Yes, the Orthodox rabbinate in Israel has never accepted DNA as an establishment for your Jewish identity. To their credit. I mean, I happen to agree with that. But yeah, it's kind of interesting to know. Interestingly, there is a South African tribe of black South African from South Africa and Zimbabwe, sub-Saharan African peoples who do have DNA evidence linking themselves to us. The Lemba of South Africa, and 60 Minutes did a story about it several years ago. It's been reported. They have DNA evidence that they are connected to the Jewish people. Yeah. 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 Being a part of the diaspora does, even the fact that you're part of the diaspora affects, is based on the fact you have Kohanic DNA. You have DNA that goes back to that. So these people, we don't know, again, exactly what happens to them when they disappear. It says that they were exiled. And it says where they were exiled, by the way. These areas, we know where those places are. And those were areas where, again, the Babylonians exiled our people. And it's possible that they just kind of remarried or continue with our people. But it's also a possibility that they disappeared. There were a lot of Jewish legends that we have to find those people. And that's kind of like why it's still part of our mentality, is that we have to find them. Look, the lost tribes is such a weird part of our psychology that it went into other people's psychology. Because if you think about it, early Christians were searching for these communities. And so you have these like legends of Prester John and Christians who would try to find the exiled Jewish communities to tell them about Jesus. The Book of Mormon, literally the LDS theology that Jesus went after his resurrection to North America to preach to the Jews who had been exiled. I mean, to some extent, that's why it's not the only thing that makes the LDS church different, but I mean, think about it. That mentality of looking for the lost tribes and looking for these lost Jews, was part of their theology. I mean, it is. You can't argue it. They're part of their theology. That the Native Americans are descendants of these people too. I mean, again, there's no DNA evidence for that, but that's a critical part of their theology. And it was a part of our theology, but it was more mythical, which is that if we can find these lost tribes, the Messiah is going to be here. If we find these people, then we'll be redeemed, if you will. Anyways, this part is also really important because it establishes that it wasn't just the northern kingdom that suffered under the Assyrians. What does it tell us? It says that literally King Sennacherib during his time, right, when he was going through this, and by the way, the Book of Kings says all this stuff happens because we're not following the law. Whereas in the Book of Chronicles we just read, it seems like we're doing everything right. But remember, Chronicles is edited after the exile already happened. The Book of Kings is being written as a cautionary tale. Like, don't let the Assyrian thing happen to us. Well, by the time Chronicles comes along, the Babylonian thing had happened to us. But here it's like you screwed up and learn from it. Well, it's too late to learn that lesson by the time of Chronicles. But here it's like they don't even talk about in Chronicles the fact that this was a punishment. So King Hezekiah, we read about this, but here it says what King Hezekiah did. King Hezekiah tried to buy himself off. You didn't read that. We didn't read that just now. King Hezekiah sent a payment of 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. And what else did Hezekiah do? He took the stuff out of the temple and he sent it to him. That wasn't in what we just read. He stripped the temple. No, because this is not important to the editor of Chronicles. They had this story. They didn't share it. The guy did everything he could to buy off the Assyrians. It's not in Chronicles. It's not in Chronicles. And here's the scene where we again read the whole thing. Read the whole thing. Read this. This is a much longer propaganda speech that here it says specifically the Rab Shakeh, which is the Assyrian governor. The Assyrian governor goes in front of his people and says, "You think the Egyptians can help you? I'm going to conquer them." right? And then the same part we did read, which is, you've been worshiping God at all your shrines. Well, Hezekiah did away with them. That's the only part that we've read so far. And it was in Chronicles 2. His agenda was making sure that people do the right thing now. Now that the temple has been rebuilt and now that the people are coming back. And so this part here, that doesn't serve the agenda. This doesn't serve the agenda. This is
Does it say
this,
too where he has to say it in Hebrew so that people understand it? Is
yeah,
that
yeah,
the
yeah, it's in here. It's in
Yeah.
here. It's in here. I don't know if he said it yet, but it's going to be there. It's going to be, it is in here too, that he speaks in Hebrew. So it's coming up. So don't rely on Egypt, right? And here it says right here, Eliakim son of Hilkiah, right, says to the governor, can you please talk in Aramaic? Like here, the whole conversation is there, right? Hey, please stop speaking in Hebrew because everyone here understands what you're saying. Let's talk in your language, right? Let's talk in Aramaic so that these people can't hear you. And of course the Assyrians say, what are you talking about? I want everyone to hear. I want all your people to hear in their Hebrew language what we're going to do to you. It's very powerful. It's a very powerful, demoralizing scene, right? And then he just says, man, Rabshakeh stood and called out in a loud voice in Judean, in Hebrew. Hear the words of the great king, the king of Assyria.
So they had
Don't
their
let
own Trump.
Don't let Hezekiah deceive you. He will not be able to deliver you from my hands. I mean, that's a crazy scene. It's a great scene, right? It's a great scene. Again, the same thing. You know, your gods can't save you from this. No other god saved them from the king of Assyria. Look, and then he goes into much greater details. Look at Hamath. Look at Arpad. Look at these other gods for these people that lived in Shepherd. Do their gods help them? So it's a very detailed, and again, it's an amazing scene. So here it is. Hezekiah, Hezekiah is going crazy. He thinks this is all over. Hezekiah goes and gets Isaiah. And in this scene in Kings, we read that Isaiah was helping Hezekiah, but it's just like very rudimentary. If we didn't have this scene, we wouldn't hear the power of this scene. Because like when you read it in Chronicles, it's just like, oh, Isaiah came and he, and told him everything's gonna be okay. Here he calls for Isaiah, and so it's Isaiah, like, what am I gonna do? Right? Hezekiah's ministers came to Isaiah. Isaiah said to them, tell your master, thus said God, do not be frightened by the words of blasphemy against me that you've heard from the minions of the king of Assyria. I will delude him, and he will hear a rumor and return to his land, and I will make him fall by the sword in his land. So Isaiah tells them it's all going to be okay. But this is a different version. This is a different version. Because in Chronicles, it says an angel came and destroyed the armies. Isaiah just said, no, it's going to go down where I'm going to have him have to go back to Assyria, to Nineveh, and he's going to be killed there. Nineveh. No, you've got to be in Nineveh right now. So, this is the way the scene goes down in the book of Kings, right? So, so it says right here, the whole version of this Isaiah. Fair maiden despises you. She mocks you. Fair Jerusalem shakes her head at you, right? This is this great scene of Isaiah telling the people this is what's really going to happen. Now let's read just a little further. And here's the angel version here. That night, an angel of God went out and struck down 185,000, and they were dead. Now, this version seems to be a little different in that what this seems to be describing is some type of plague. And here it says right here that he got killed by his own sons. And then the new guy, Esarhaddon, takes over. Now, in one version of the story, it seems like an angel goes and kills everybody. In the other version, it seems, the older version in Kings, it seems like they wake up and there's 185,000 dead people in the tents. Both of them seem to be describing some type of miracle. Whereas in the book of Chronicles, it's the angel happens. And I mean, there's no question that the chronicler had the story in front of them. Why did they not tell that story this way? Definitely, it's not their agenda to try to tell us the whole story. This story also tells us that Hezekiah got sick. And here's this whole story of how Isaiah comes and helps him gets healed. And the Chronicles version says that Hezekiah doesn't show proper appreciation for the miracle that was done for him. This book has a whole different thing. The original says this is the problem. The Babylonians send letters to King Hezekiah when he's sick. And Hezekiah brings in the Babylonians into the temple and into the palace, and he shows them all the stuff around the palace. And he shows them the temple. And Isaiah gets very mad at Hezekiah and said to him, what are you doing? What are you doing? And he says, all these people came from Babylonia, and I was showing them off all the stuff we have. And Isaiah says to him, you're an idiot. Everything you just showed him, the time is coming when everything in your palace and that your ancestors have stored up to this day will be carried off to Babylon, and nothing will remain. And some of your sons, your own issue, whom you have fathered, will be taken to serve as eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. So you, big shot, Hezekiah, you think you're showing the Babylonians like you're cool, like you're going to show them your stuff? You're an idiot, because the Babylonians are going to wind up being worse than the Assyrians. Now, it doesn't happen the next day. This seems to be, it's going to happen like next week. Like your own kids are going to be eunuchs there. But they were his great grandkids. It happened 150 years later, 130 years, whatever. It happens 4 generations, 5 generations later, but it does happen. So Isaiah tells them off for that. So those are versions of the story that are just flat out, they're not in the Chronicles version. I'm going to actually show it to you in a very clear way, what's going on here, which is, let me just show you this real quick as we conclude today. This is the differences between these things. So when somebody asks a flat out question, what's the agenda? What's going on here? The parts that I just showed you quickly, those few chapters in Kings, what's really going on here? Well, Kings is definitely showing us a history. Whereas what we just read about Hezekiah is focusing on the communal renewal, the fact that these people are doing the right thing as a community and they're doing the right thing religiously. They're worshiping God in the right way. Look, I had AI generate this. I don't know that this exists anywhere else. Should. I probably would have done a little differently, maybe a little differently. But there's a logic to this. Anyways, when is it actually written? or when is it edited? This is written before the exile in Kings, and this is written after the exile, by the way. Assuming that what we just read in Kings was written before the exile or near the exile, it was written by somebody who really knew that the Babylonians were a problem. Because that part that talks about the Babylonians is written by somebody who either Isaiah was an amazing prophet, because it says Isaiah said it, or it was written by somebody who focused on what Isaiah said, or maybe invented what Isaiah said, which is, don't worry about the Assyrians. It's the Babylonians that are the problem. So again, written by somebody who knew the Babylonians were a problem. Babylonians are already over for these people. The overall tone is definitely realistic and sobering. I think it's fair to say that this is definitely more instructional and somewhat ideal. I maybe would reverse that. Instructional, which is don't do what they did, and do what they did in some cases, which is worship God in the right way. Hezekiah is definitely got some bigger problems in the version that we have in Kings. In Chronicles, he's almost perfect. I mean, the only thing he does wrong is he doesn't show his appreciation for his healing appropriately. What doesn't explain is, why does he even have to deal with the Assyrians in the first place? Like, why does he, a great king, why does he have to deal with this? He's the king who has to do, he has to deal with his country being besieged. I understand, but he's a good guy, right? Not only, look, Jerusalem was saved during his time, right? But my friends, I showed you these pictures before. The oldest pictures we have of the Jewish people are right here. These are our ancestors being flayed alive by the Assyrians at Lachish. This is the thing I tell you. I go to every time I go to London, when I go to the British Museum, I go to see these. These are the people of Lachish. These are our ancestors. These are Jews. These are pictures of Jews. These are our ancestors going to stand before, whether they stood before Sennacherib or his general or whatever, essentially his authority. These are the Jews of Lachish, which is in Judah. That was one of the main cities in Judah. We read about Lachish. When Lachish falls, that's when Hezekiah really starts panicking. They're like, they're on our doorstep. They've taken Lachish. So, yeah, Judah survives and Jerusalem survives, but a lot of his kingdom was destroyed. You know? And we have the Ninevite version of it. So we have the version we have in Kings, we have the version we have in Isaiah, we have the version we have in Chronicles, and then we have the version that King Sennacherib did. This is in Nineveh. We found it. We have these. Now, I told you the last time I was in the British Museum, this part of the British Museum is going through excavation, so you can only see it from like around the corner. You couldn't get in and go right up to it. But yeah, these are also, there's a version of this also in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, where you can see a copy of this. But yeah, this is what Jewish people look like 2,700 years ago. So we have the Assyrian version as well. And we found it when Nineveh was excavated. We had these walls, these amazing walls. So again, we know that it was not easy for King Hezekiah. Yeah, he's a survivor, but poor guy had to be through this, right? So in Kings, we get virtually nothing about what he does. And we read about how he destroyed the Nehushtan, though, about how he destroyed the bronze serpent that was, according to the book of Kings, went back to Moses, was being used to cure people. Well, Hezekiah destroyed it because people were worshiping it. That's not even mentioned in the book of Chronicles, but it seems to be part of his reforms. But what we do read is this amazing chapter where we talk about how he purified the temple and how he reorganized the priests and the Levites and how he had them do the music. All those things, it's not in Kings. Not a lot about the temple. Here, it's most of the account. The account of the war is a fifth of what it is. The focus on the priests and the Levites in the temple is 5 times more. It's the Passover celebration that we read about that went on for a whole chapter. It's not even mentioned in Kings. The northern Israelites, in the book of Chronicles, it says he invited people from northern Israel to come down and celebrate. That's not in Kings. The Assyrian threat, that is what is in the book of Kings. In Chronicles, it's like not the focus. The Rav Shakeh speech, which I showed you from Kings, it's there in quotes. It's not even there in Chronicles. The tribute that I told you that they gave, it's not there in Chronicles. Isaiah, you had the whole Isaiah quote there. You had the whole text from Isaiah. It's not there. It mentions Isaiah, but it's not, the text isn't there. Hezekiah's prayer, when he prays on behalf of the people, it doesn't, in the book of Kings, it doesn't say he did it for everybody. In Chronicles, it does, which is interesting because it kind of goes along with this idea that what he's doing in a religious sense. Yeah, the angel description is different. I don't know what to make of it. Again, to me, somewhere in the middle of that is this idea that like a lot of people died. Okay, I'm definitely affected by science here on this, which is it seems like there was a massive plague that went through the Assyrian camp that killed lots of people. Is it a miracle? I guess, maybe. A lot of people died and they had to go back. But the weird thing is the Assyrians never talk about it. They don't talk about losing a lot of people. It's not on their walls. We don't have that side. I don't know what to tell you. Hezekiah's illness, much more detailed. There's the cure stuff in the book of Kings. We didn't look at it, but Isaiah tells him to put this fig concoction on himself and it helps cure him. Babylonian and the envoys, that whole scene isn't there. Where he shows him the stuff around the temple. I love that scene because it's like Isaiah's telling him, you don't know what you've done. You've opened the door. It's like one of those scenes that you have in the movie where you're like, oh, that's for the next episode. That's for the next movie. They just gave you a little piece that you're going to see in the next movie. That's what happens in the book of Kings. You don't get that in the book of Chronicles. Again, it makes sense. It's not part of the agenda. It's already done. It's a done deal. Babylonians, it's old news, right? It already happened. Hezekiah's pride, yeah, definitely there in the Kings, and it's definitely in the Chronicle version, which makes them a lot better, fixes it. His repentance happens. A minor difference, one of Judah's best. In Chronicles, he's almost perfect. Yeah. And what it gets down to is this. What's the agenda? There's a message here, which is Kings is telling you why we're going to be exiled. And Chronicles is trying to tell you, how do we fix it? How do we come back, rebuild, and not wind up in the same place where these guys were? And so this is going back to this, written near the exile or during the exile, while the exile is happening. And one of them's written after it's already happened. Different generations, different mentality. Why? Well, it is interesting. Yeah. So what's interesting is, of course, I mean, nowadays, what would you even say? Is it the history book that's written in 1940, 39? The history book that's written in 1939, which, by the way, who's going to go back and read a history? I don't even know how many history textbooks they had in 1939. Probably now they have hundreds of textbooks, but there's probably like 3 or 4 textbooks that were used in the country in 1939 for history. If you look at a history book from 1939 and then look at a book in 1980, 19, let's say maybe 2000, maybe now, you looked at those 2 history books, how would things be taught differently? Now, of course, you're going to go, oh, well, World War II happened. And so World War II is not in the 1939 book. Okay, fine. But read what it will say about the Civil War in 1939. Read about what it would say about the Native Americans in 1939. Read what it would say about lots of things that happened that had nothing to do with World War II, but directly, but were affected by it. So think about how we tell history and think about the way that we reframe stories to prove our point. And so it would be very different, not just in the obvious ways, but also in the ways that we would talk about when you freeze history. And my guess is that it will be a lot different in, let's say, 1965, 1939. You take a history book from 1939, history book from 1965, and a history book from 2000. And then you see how different those books are, not just in the way that they talk about the events that happened during that period, but the events that happened before. See how they're different. And when you think about what happens when you're telling the same story, telling the same story to different people, what happens? What happens to the way you tell the story? So, yeah, and think about what the way you tell a story to your kids versus your grandkids. I mean, there's things like that you'd think of that you'd be like, yeah, what's kept that? What do you not tell them? What do you tell people when you have an agenda of what you want to get through to them? It's like that story doesn't fit my agenda, so I'm not going to tell you that story. And by the way, it's not always the good story, right? It could be the bad story. It could be, I'm going to teach you the story so you learn not to make this mistake. Well, you didn't tell me the good part of it. Of course I didn't tell you the good part of it, because if I told you the good part of it, you take away the wrong lesson, which is that it all worked out fine. No, but seriously, we do that all the time. You tell somebody, like I made a horrible mistake. Yeah, but it led me to meet your mother. And if I hadn't, then you wouldn't be here. Well, you don't tell that part. You just tell the part of how I made this horrible mistake. And then somebody reminds you, yeah, but if you hadn't made that mistake. So it's all about the way we reframe the story. And yeah, we definitely do it ourselves. That's one of the things I think we take away from this is whether or not we look at this as a way we think about ourselves as a nation, as a people, as Jews, as whatever, we can think about the way we do this as people and how we tell our story. So, yes.
The next passage would be to go, wait, like just years and years, right? So it's just how it was inserted.
Well, so there's things missing, right? There's things missing. So Marsha's asking, well, there's passages there, this was there and that was, yes, there's places that there's things that are missing, but there are also, look, we have to deal with the fact that when the Bible tells a story, like we just read, where Isaiah says the Babylonians are going to come and they're going to take everything. Look, that's a prophecy. I mean, you could say that that was a prophecy that he said, and he's a prophet, so of course he does prophecy. Or you could say that was written by somebody who inserted that there to teach you a lesson, which is don't be a big shot, which I think is a great lesson. Don't go around bragging to people about what you have, especially somebody who could take it from you. It's like, you don't take your wallet out, in front of people in Vegas and go, look how much money I just won, everybody. I just took them for $1,000. You- so people can learn from these stories. So again, thank you everybody for being here. It was great to have a nice crowd. Thank you, Rosemary, for
You.
reading for us. And again, join us tomorrow night for the Kabbalah and the interesting journey through Jewish mysticism, which is a little different than what we read today. Thank you, everybody. And we also posted yesterday or today, I can't remember, it went out today, a way to help the people in Jackson, Mississippi. That's their direct website. I know there's federations that are raising money. If you want to help the synagogue in Jackson directly, Beth Israel, you can do it through the site the link that we set up. So take care.